All right, everybody, welcome to Ron Book Show on this Thursday night. What is it? 5 days to Election Tuesday. So getting there. This will be over soon, I promise, and we'll be able to shift to criticizing whoever gets elected and to can you hear stuff? We'll get a shift to criticizing whoever's elected and to. All right, good. And to other topics. So, all right, we have a full house. I expect more people to join in a little while. We had a lot of people sign up for the Q&A today. So I think we had 19 people. I'm not sure if, I don't think all of them are here, but we had 19 people originally. Let's see how many. Yeah, that's a good group there. So we're going to go the usual. We'll do the usual thing that we do here. We'll go through one by one. Everybody will have a chance to ask a question. Of course, those of you who are listening live on YouTube have the opportunity to ask questions through the live chat. Those of you who are used to listening to the show or watching the show on Facebook, somehow I'm locked out of my ability to post on Facebook. So I can't stream to Facebook right now. Facebook has decided that because I am in Puerto Rico, I might be a Russian bot or something like that. I don't know exactly what's going on, but the fact is they won't let me post. So my admins can post on Facebook, but I, the owner of the account, is not allowed to post on Facebook. So still trying to work it out. I think it's mostly just a glitch on Facebook's part, but hopefully we'll have it worked out. And maybe after the election, they'll just calm down, cool off, and maybe loosen up some of these weird restrictions that they placed on all of us. All right, we're going to get going because we got a lot of questions today, and we want to give everybody a chance to ask. So we're going to start with, and I'm going to unmute you as we go. So we're going to start with Roy. Hey, Roy. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
I unmuted. Yeah, I thought you would be doing it. I was waiting and waiting. Anyhow.
Go again. Roy, sorry.
No problem. So I have a question about pharmaceutical pricing. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, you touched on this subject, and you said something which I might have misinterpreted, but it seemed to be 180 degrees from what my position had been. So I'm going to ask about that.
Yep.
The origins of my position were a conversation, a very casual conversation I had with somebody who works in the pharmaceutical industry. And he told me that they have his company with some particular pharmaceutical, or in general, has an exclusive period of exclusivity of 10 years. And that the beginning doesn't start when they go to market, but like on day one, when they still have testing to do and go through the whole process, approval process. And I came away from that thinking that means that maybe they have 10 years to recoup their significant R&D expense. And I thought, gee, that stinks before generic can come along and compete with them at a much, much, much lower price. And I thought, well, no wonder their pricing is high, because they have just 7 years. Now, what I thought you said a few years ago, you were taking the FDA to task for not allowing generics sooner than they do, which keeps the price high. And I said, huh? And I thought, huh? I'm criticizing them for letting them go in so soon. And you were saying they should get, why are they keeping them out? So you can clarify that.
No, I don't, if I said that I certainly didn't mean to say that. No, I don't think that the patents are too long on pharmaceuticals. One could argue today about copyrights and things like that, but not on pharmaceuticals. I did say that what was going on was some drugs, like the insulin drugs, are not on patent. So they're not on patent. And what's happening is the FDA is slow in approving competition where there are drugs that are not on patent, so they're not approving competition even then. So even then, it's taking a long time and it takes a huge expense to get the FDA to approve an alternative competitive drug when the drug is already not on patent. And insulin is the best example of this. The FDA has all kinds of barriers, all kinds of restrictions that make it difficult to compete even within a market that is in the public domain in a sense of the intellectual property. So if I said that the patent is too long and it should be shorter, then I misspoke. Or I didn't mean.
And it could have been my misinterpretation, because I certainly agree with what you just said. In fact, I had a personal experience. I was taking a medication that apparently has been around since the Roman Empire, and it used to cost me $5.
Yep.
Then the FDA, for some reason, stepped in, and it now costs me hundreds of dollars.
Yep.
And there is no patent on it. It's yeah. Okay.
There are all kinds of shenanigans in the pricing mechanisms of drugs. There's the structure of the market, which is completely distorted. No free market would ever produce the structure that we have today. A lot of it is to protect, in a sense, Medicare and Medicaid and to protect their pricing. But they've created, through regulations, a distorted, inefficient, unproductive structure by which drugs are distributed and priced. And that's a big part of it. Okay. Thanks, Roy. Let's go to Daniel. And I'm just going by the order you appear on my screen, which is somewhat random. You have to unmute yourselves. Sorry. You're all muted and you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you for that reminder.
Sure.
I'm seeing suggestions that regardless who wins the election, that more lockdowns may start once politicians have locked in their seats. What are the chances you think that 2021 could be worse than 2020?
Wow. I mean, I don't think it's going to be worse because I don't think they can afford it. That is, I think that it is such a disaster. On the other hand, and this is where complete irrationality steps in. Given that people believe that the government can just print money and helicopter it down to us and just send it to us, if Biden wins and the Democrats win the Senate, then you're going to see a massive stimulus bill that'll bail out every state, every locality, every city. So maybe they feel like they can afford to shut down because the federal government can just bail everybody out and nobody cares. I guess that is possible. I really hope not. I hope that's not the solution that people come up with. But I was surprised to see France and Germany locked down. They can't afford it. The French economy is being crushed right now. It was crushed before this, and now, and they don't have the ability to come up with stimulus packages and part stimulus packages. The French can't print money. European Central Bank can, but they've already got negative interest rates. They've already printed a huge amount of money. The European Union has done some stimulus packages, but it's not easy. It's harder there to get a big stimulus package passed than it is in the United States. And yet, look, Germany, a country that's super conservative about these things, and France have both locked down their economy for a month, for the whole month of November, which is shocking. It's just shocking. And it's shocking that, I mean, people are tolerating it. In Germany, there's some demonstrations. I don't think anybody's demonstrating in France. They figure another month vacation, cool. It's such a not productive economy. I guess now it's even less productive. So I don't expect it, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I never thought I'd see what happened in March happen. So I've been surprised before, and I won't be surprised if I'm surprised again. So, but it truly is, particularly right now where the death rates are down. Hospitalization is up, but the hospitals seem to be coping. There are very few places in the country today that are really struggling in terms of the hospital capacity. And even then, it's mostly because bad decision making by the governors. I mean, New York never used the excess capacity that it had because, you know, they made bad decisions about how to allocate hospital beds. I think that's happening across the country. Hospitals know how to deal with this. They know how to expand capacity, and the federal government can create field hospitals and things like that. There's just no reason to lock down young people, you know. And the fact is that during the lockdowns, people still got COVID. So rates did not go down. Case rates did not go down that much. They went down somewhat, but death rates are way down. For, you know, for three reasons, I guess. One is mostly young people are getting it. Two, so that they don't die. Young people can cope with it fairly well. Two, we've got better drugs. Three, we're just better at treating it. We know what to do when somebody comes into the emergency room. The doctors know what to do. I just don't understand the kind of panic. And unless our politicians get a sense that they're going to be penalized politically for this, this is local politicians, a lot of whom are not up for election right now, but will be in 2 years. I guess you're right. It's the easy solution for them. It's the least risky.
And people say that they're tired of the lockdowns, of wearing masks, et cetera, but no one is saying we need to limit the emergency powers of government. No one is saying that.
No, a few of the local courts have done that. So it's good for, I can't remember if it was the court in Pennsylvania. I can't remember if it was federal or state court. There was a court in Wisconsin. And I think, again, this issue of the emergency powers is going to the Supreme Court of the state of Wisconsin. They might override the local government. We will see. But it's very depressing, and I'm not sure what can be done about it other than people have to stand up and say enough is enough, and at least give the politicians a sense that there are going to be consequences in the ballot box.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Nick.
Yeah, Yaron. I was just doing a little research. I was just curious on how many copies of Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead have been sold overall. Tell me if these numbers are right. I got 7 million copies of Atlas Shrugged in 2010. Fountainhead, 6.5 million, translated in 20 languages, and 30 million overall copies of the works of Ayn Rand. And
yeah, that's probably 5-6 years old, but those are good numbers, I think, from 5, 6, or maybe 10 years. I'm not sure, but those all sound familiar.
Yeah, and the other thing is, we're selling and there's 300,000 copies yearly of I think Atlas Shrugged. Is that number accurate?
It's probably high. It's probably from the mid 2000s. It's lower than that today. It's probably around 100,000.
So year to year, are the numbers do you feel the numbers are going up, or we're getting more distribution of our work?
So the numbers all peaked in 2009. Atlas Shrugged sold 500,000 copies in 2009. They stayed pretty high in, I'd say, the 300,000 range through 2013. And they've declined since 2013. I don't think they continue to decline. I think the last couple of years they've increased, but they're in the low 100,000 area rather than the 500,000 area. Now, if Biden wins, there might be another spike in sales of Atlas Shrugged. I mean, we do better when people on the right feel under siege. They run to buy Atlas Shrugged for their kids and their nephews and their nieces and stuff like that. That's what happened with the Tea Party movement. We'll see if it happens again next week. But Atlas Shrugged sold very well under Obama. The best thing Obama did was drive up sales of Atlas Shrugged. But what's interesting, I'll just make this note, is that Ayn Rand, for the first time ever, I'd say over the last 3 to 4 years, is selling more copies. Her books are selling more copies outside the United States than in the United States. That is, foreign sales of Ayn Rand's books have been going through the roof for the last few years, and that's unprecedented. So over half the books that sell are selling outside the US.
How many free copies are we giving away in terms of the high schools and all that stuff? That
200 to 300,000, and we typically don't count those when we announce these numbers. So the numbers you mentioned do not include the free copies.
And that would be Anthem or
Mostly Anthem, but also about, I'd say, 20 to 50,000 of Fountainhead, 20 to 50,000 of Atlas in any given year.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And teachers excited. And now they're getting Anthem electronically. So we're not sending them physical books. They're getting downloads so they can just put them on the iPads for the kids. And the kids are reading them that way because everything's going digital. So, and it's costing us less as well. So it's really good. It's excellent.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Tom.
Hi, Yaron. So on your May 13th show, you were speaking about coronavirus and you said, quote, "So if you look at New York, in New York, most of the people who died of this were poor." So
Yeah.
my question is, how did we know that then? And maybe how do we know it now? How do we know the socioeconomic status of someone that has been categorized as a coronavirus death?
I think they kept some kind of demographic statistics from it. It's a lot of it has to do with the neighborhoods from which they came. Not as many deaths. And if you look at the deaths, and I can't remember now, but a lot of them were in the Bronx, in Queens, in areas where there's greater poverty. Some of it might be speculation about the fact that they're minorities and therefore extrapolation that they're poor, because in those neighborhoods, minorities tend to be poorer. And so I don't know that they had statistics on income. I think they extrapolated from location, ethnic group, location and ethnic group. I think that's where they came. And the other extrapolation was that these older people who were dying were coming from household in which multi-generations were living in. And I think, again, the extrapolation was that those tended to be poorer households.
But the city or state of New York was putting out statistics along those lines to make the inference of them being poor as opposed to just living in maybe economically depressed areas or being of a certain age?
I think they were making that conclusion. That is, I don't think they gave statistics in terms of their income, wealth. I think they were extrapolating and making kind of conclusions on that. And I'm not sure, I don't remember now if that was the city making those extrapolations or whether it was the media making those extrapolations. Could have been both. It could have been either. I just can't remember.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. All right, George.
Good evening, Yaron.
Hey, George.
Let's take a break from COVID and let's talk about some Mr. Sunshine here. So,
Yeah.
So a spoiler alert for anyone listening who has not watched Mr. Sunshine on Netflix, now would be the time to hit mute for the next few minutes because we're going to talk about the ending.
Yep.
So that said, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the ending of the show. I recognized around the 18th episode that it was not going to be a happy ending.
Yep.
But I was not expecting the bloodbath of the final episode or the final two episodes.
Yep.
And with what little I've been able to read about and learn about that time period, it was a brutal span of time for Korea. So for the show to be historically legitimate and culturally relevant, it really couldn't be a happy ending. They had to stay honest with their audience as well as with the material they're working from. But even so, every major character that we got attached to, every character, regardless of their character arc, their development, their growth, if they came in contact with Ai-Sin, if they were close to her, they died.
Yep.
And I'm just curious, like what you made of that. I have my thoughts on it and what it says about a lot of things, but how did you react after your first and second viewings of the series?
So my view is it's one of the things that makes the show really, really good. I think a happy ending would have been inconsistent with the theme and inconsistent with the conflict. So the fundamental conflict between the two heroes of the show is a conflict between love of, romantic love and patriotism. She is, her highest value is her country. Her highest value is her patriotism. That is what animates her. That's what motivates her. She loves the male lead, but it's clearly subordinated. He is not her highest value. For him, clearly, for a variety of different reasons that the show explores, his highest value is her. It's the romantic love. The patriotism is borderline unimportant to him. He could take it or leave it. Indeed, during much of the show, he's antagonistic to it. So you have two love, central figures whose values hierarchy do not match. Something has to give. Now, she could have given up her patriotism and run off with him to America. But that would have been inconsistent with her character, and it would have been inconsistent with what the show is all about. And he could have become patriotic, but that would have been inconsistent with his character, inconsistent with his history, inconsistent with what the show is all about. So that had to resolve itself. And in a conflict of values like that, in a time of war, it really is the only resolution. I mean, they both could have died. She could have died. But really, the resolution would be for him to die so that she can live and keep fighting. And it's heart-wrenching. It's, tears in your eyes and horrible and sad and disappointing and all of that. But it's the only logical thing that can, from a dramatic perspective, that's the way it needs to happen. And from a values, what I like about the show is it takes values seriously. You might not agree with the values. I might not agree with her about the patriotism, but she goes all the way with it, right? And he goes all the way with the fact that she is his primary value. Therefore, he must, in a situation where he can save her life, he must save her life. He has no option but to save her life. So I think it's consistently necessary. It's logically necessary from the beginning of the show for it to end that way. The other characters, there's a grander motivation here. First, the other two male characters can never have her. So in a sense, there's a tragic element to that as well. But each one of them suffers for their own sins, right? So the playboy suffers for being a playboy and not taking life seriously soon enough. And by the time he does take life seriously, in a sense, it's too late. So he has, as you said, gained and become better and become a heroic human being. But in a sense, it's too late. But by that point, his life is doomed. And I think the other two characters, one, she's neutral for too long. Neutrality in a time of war leads to death. And the other character is of course a gangster. And by the time he comes around to redeeming his life, it's too late. So there's a logic to every one of them dying. And then of course, the reason they all die in some sense is there's a sense in which they have to die in the same way as Kira at the end of We the Living. And I hope I'm not giving away anything here. If you haven't read We the Living, Kira dies in the end, but you should still read it. She has to die. That is, in a time of disaster, in a time of war, in a time of oppression, horror happens, and you can't evade that, and you can't escape it. Even good guys, even better guys, even people who are willing. Now, what I liked about the show is that the heroine survives the fight, and she continues to fight in spite of the tragedy, in spite of her losses. She sticks to that highest of values for her. So she never gives up. She is still pursuing her value. And that, I think, added to the power of the show. She doesn't give up. She doesn't mope. She's a fighter to the end. And you have to love, I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't fall in love with her, given what she represents and who she is and what she is. So anyway, that is my interpretation of the ending of Mr. Sunshine. All of you who muted can unmute. Of course, you can't hear me, but hopefully. Does that make sense, George?
Yes, and that's very much, you know, how I saw it too. I think where I found the difficulty was in all the supporting characters. And this is so much more credit to the writers of the show, is that you could almost walk away thinking that it was nihilistic, that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you grow, if you redeem, if you stop trying to play all sides against each other, but choose a side, as Hina eventually did, that you're still going to end up the same way. But the final scene of Ison being fulfilled, of still living that life, you realize that, you know, they weren't sacrifices, and that she's not living a life of resentment. She's not living halfway because of these losses. She's living fully,
exactly,
as well she should. And that final scene is what keeps the show, I think, away from the nihilism that for a moment there, I almost succumbed to, but I didn't.
No, I mean, look, I think even in a lot of action movies and a lot of Westerns, people who commit sins and then redeem themselves die. And a lot of the morality play that's involved there is, you know, certain sins cannot be easily redeemed in life. And you know, the names of the movies escape me, but you can think of a lot of heroes who you know have a dark past, do something heroic, but end the movie dying, not out of nihilism, but out of a sense of, there's a price to pay, and you know, there's a sense in which justice is fully, you know, you can be a gangster, and even though you turn into a good guy, there's still a price to pay, and the price, and a big part of that price is often your life. So I think it's a motif in many movies. It's not unique to, you know, it's not unique to this movie or to this series.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I mean, it conjures up Kira and also, you know, Eddie Willers and Cheryl and Atlas Shrugged, that in a world that's so brutalizing, good, ordinary people suffer the most. And it, you know.
Although I'm still hoping Eddie's alive, right? Francisco's hired a plane and they've gone out and they found him.
That's a question for the next Q&A. I'll let us move on the conversation here.
Sounds good. All right, Derek.
Hi, thanks for doing this. So as the election seems to be leaning in a direction that we will be discussing environmental actions by, or supposed needed actions by government on environmental concerns. I really appreciated the sort of your version of the debate answers on energy, and I was thinking, as our neighbors to the north are planning a single-use plastic ban, how you would respond on that topic.
Hi. I don't get the plastic thing, right? I mean, yes, I get it. It goes into the oceans, it's polluting the oceans, fish are dying. You know, there's got to be a solution to that involves technology, that involves private property, that involves innovation, and that does not involve telling me I can't use a straw and having to use those. Have you used those paper straws that some of these restaurants are using? They're terrible. I mean, yeah, you get it's just awful. And without destroying our lives. So I've read that there are people developing enzymes that'll break down plastic and make it recyclable or make it degradable. There are all kinds of things that can be done, but just like with COVID, to go back to COVID, the response of politicians is ban it, stop people's action, use the state to control human behavior rather than look for ways to incentivize innovation and incentivize ways to deal with the problem if it is a real problem. And I have to admit, I'm always skeptical. I always start by being skeptical and weary of any claim to environmental problems, not because I don't think they exist, but because I don't trust the motivations of the people that are pushing them, they're pushing the problems. So again, the knee-jerk reaction of politicians is to use the tool of the politician, which is a gun, which is coercion, which is force, which is lockdowns, which is restricting freedom, and that is never the solution unless you can show that my behavior clearly, unequivocally harms you. And then you have to have some kind of restitution and some kind of ways to resolve it. In the case of plastics, that clearly is not the case.
Yeah, especially when it seems like when you go to the ocean, that most of it's coming from like 10 rivers, like 90% of it's coming from 10 rivers.
And I think most of them are not in the US. But look, if
Yeah.
you privatize the oceans, I mean, in 150, 200 years from now, when we're talking about these things, if you found ways to creatively privatize the oceans or privatize fishing stock, imagine if you privatized the fishing stock in the oceans, then there would now be fishermen and there would now be owners of that property or miners or people who built underground, underwater cities or whoever wanted to use the ocean, right, would then have an incentive to clean up the plastics. And they would use technology to do that. And there are all kinds of ways you can do it, from robots that go out and clean the plastics in the ocean to releasing enzymes that eat them up. But, so the solution to almost all environmental problems is to create private property, is to find ways to apply private property to the particular issue involved. All right, Jonathan.
Hi, Yaron. Thank you for doing this. And I just wanted to congratulate you and the Institute on, I think, net a really successful response to Paul Krugman's article. I think thanks to your rapid response and Ankar's response and all of your followers and the Institute's followers, I think you successfully got the headline changed and brought a lot of attention and publicity. And I always appreciate the fact that when Rand is smeared, and she's often smeared, I think the Institute is always the voice out there presenting the rational, true perspective on objectivism in Rand. So congratulations to you, the Institute, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Question? No?
That's it.
Okay. All right, Brad.
Good evening, Yaron. So quick thought for you. I noted today a very surprising statistic on the amount of people moving to Connecticut, new residents. And it had me thinking about how we've all learned in the pandemic how technology can free us of the urban environments and that we're used to. And every day you're hearing about more famous people, prominent people leaving California. You're seeing thousands of people flee New York. I guess my question is, has technology in this pandemic enabled Atlas to finally shrug?
I mean, there's a sense of yes, that is, people are moving away from certain localities. They've got more choices. Technology definitely allows us to have a lot more choices, and that's a huge step forward. But in the end, people are not and I don't think can really completely shrug. So we're moving from New York to Connecticut. Connecticut is not a tax-wise and regulations-wise is no Galt's Gulch. People are moving to Texas. Texas is a big improvement, but again, they're still under the thumb of the federal government and federal regulations and federal taxation. I have moved to Puerto Rico, where I'm not under the federal taxation, at least. So I've shrugged to that extent. So I think what technology has done, rather than think about it in terms of shrugging, because the other aspect of it is what people understand implicitly, that they're moving because they don't like the taxes or they don't like the particular laws. They don't get it at the depth of anywhere near the depth at which the heroes of Atlas Shrugged, when they shrug, get it. That is, they don't quite get the extent to which they're being, they're being exploited, to the extent to which they deserve their freedom and their autonomy and to be left alone. So what we're getting from technology is a massive increase in the opportunities that we have, opportunities to make choices about where we can live and how to communicate and with whom to communicate. And that is huge. I mean, I think it's not quite shrugging, but it's certainly teaching people that they have much more control over their lives and giving them much more control of their lives. And I think that's a huge benefit. Unfortunately, people don't seem to learn from experience.
I guess the other side of it, though,
Yep.
is not necessarily for the Atlas, but the people who run these cities, these states, the bureaucrats.
Yep.
For them, it feels like Atlas is shrugging because all the creators, all the sources of revenue that are leaving really forces them to face consequences and rethink the way they've run their political environments, their economy. I mean, so it may be transformative in the sense that it calls into stark relief some of these issues for the bureaucratic systems that have built up.
I think that's right. I want to see how it plays out, because you would think that would have happened already. New Jersey, Illinois, to some extent, California being bankrupt for a while now, and none of the bureaucrats seem to care or seem to have changed or shifted their behavior. It's not socialism and statism and bureaucratic management don't exist because there are no examples to show what the terrible outcome they lead to is. Like, all these kids are socialists on campuses. It's not like there are no examples out there of what happens under socialism, right? We got Venezuela, we've got the Eastern Europe, we've got North Korea, we've got all the different variations of socialism we've seen over decades and decades, and yet nobody seems to learn. So the real question is, will they learn? I mean, I think step one is going to be that the Biden administration is going to bail out all these cities and states, thus delaying the end even further into the future. The end will come, but it just keeps delaying. Unfortunately for California, people are leaving constantly, but new people keep coming in. And the funny thing about the people coming in is, as I think you know, Brad, many of them are incredibly productive entrepreneurs who then create wealth that keeps funding California, and only then do they leave. So there's this, it's as if, they keep getting these new people to suck the blood out of. So some people leave and new people keep coming in to keep it afloat. I think it takes a long time, and I'm not sure that at the end of the day, people learn the lesson. One of the great tragedies that is happening with people leaving California, and you can ask people in Colorado and in Oregon and Washington State about this. People leave California to Colorado and because California is oppressive. And then in Colorado, they vote to make Colorado like California. So they don't leave their politics in California. They bring it with them to Colorado. So Colorado now is a completely blue state in a sense that it's completely democratic. It's moving towards more and more states and more controls. And the Coloradans blame it on the Californians who've moved in. Now, I don't think it's that simple, but it's part of the solution. So to me, it still boils down to it's ideas. And all of existential reality, everything about reality, everything about the world out there proves that we are right, that capitalism works, that statism and socialism doesn't, that it's bad. And it doesn't seem to matter. It's so frustrating unless you convince people of the fundamental ideas that are involved. And those fundamental ideas are ideas about self-interest and ideas about the true nature of capitalism. So I'm not as optimistic about these things happening and people will learn from them. Maybe, but it takes too long. Things can get much worse. And even if they learn, it's like in the 70s. People learned something in the 70s. They learned that what was going on was bad and they needed to change. And they elected Reagan and Thatcher to bring about that change. And that was great. And we got 20 years of good economic times and overall relatively positive things happening for 20 years. But then they forgot again and everything shifted backwards. So if we do get a swing back, it'll be a swing like in the 80s and 90s. It won't be lasting unless we can start changing people's actual ideas about the world. I was on a panel today of hedge funds, hedge fund guys, me and two others, talking about the elections and the economy. And one of the questions was about, Keynes is popular now, right? Both Republicans and Democrats want stimulus, lots of stimulus, I said in the call, I said, I remember the last time a president declared that we are all Keynesians now. I think it was Richard Nixon in 1971 or 72. And then in the 1980s, nobody was a Keynesian, right? Keynes was dead, completely dead, annihilated. Nobody in the profession would declare they were Keynesians, and nobody in politics. And now Keynes is back, and as if nobody learned from the 70s anything. Nobody learned from history anything. Nobody studied economics for the last 40 years at all. It's unless you change those fundamental philosophical ideas, we just keep going back to the same rotten ideas. And every time we go back, I think we're in a worse position for it. So I hate to be so pessimistic. Okay, I've got a couple of people with phone numbers here. So we're going to do that. I think you can go in and actually put in your name instead of the phone number. One of the options is. But anyway, 917 area code.
Ron?
Yep.
Hi, it's Andrew.
Hey, Andrew.
How are you?
Good.
Good. I wanted to ask you about your views on comedy. It strikes me that a lot of modern comedy sounds an anxiety. I was thinking of like Leonard Peikoff tells the story about how he was comparing himself to John Galt, to Ayn Rand on a date, and saying that he would do the uncork the bottle of wine perfectly, and Leonard wouldn't. And Ayn Rand said something like, paraphrasing, she said, like, in life you ignore the trivial,
yep,
and in art you omit it.
Yep.
And it seems to me that a lot of comedy is like the person, not only not ignoring the wine getting uncorked imperfectly, but like focusing on it obsessively,
yes,
and commiserating with people,
yes,
other people about it.
yes.
And I was watching an interview with Ricky Gervais today, and it was a comedy show. So, I mean, there was shtick there, but I just wonder how much of it is shtick and how much of it is real when you are approaching comedy that way. That he was kind of like, he said, human beings are an awful species.
Yep.
And, I just think you create a certain version of the world by what you focus on in life.
Yeah, but
so
that's true. That's absolutely true in comedy, right? If you're making fun of the good, you're trivializing the good. If you're making fun of human beings, qua human beings, you're trivializing human beings. So comedy is very revealing. What you laugh at and what you make fun of is very revealing of what you view as fundamental and what you view as the trivial, as the uncorking the champagne bottle. And you can see comedy, different comedians and different comedies and different eras of comedy focusing on different things. And that reveals a lot about what people found funny during that period of time. I think it's very revealing what we find funny today.
Yeah. And I mean, that could be, you can talk about human beings' foibles and it could be funny, but it's overdone. It's like, it's too much, it's obsessive. So like, I don't have a good sense for benevolent comedy. I mean, what is, in your view, life-affirming comedy?
Well, I think it is making fun of foibles, but making fun of foibles that are really trivial rather than foibles that are really major, right? So it's good. I think comedy is about making fun of stupid people, of stupidity in the world. There's a scene in this comes to my mind when I think of comedy. So There's a scene in Blackadder. Blackadder's a British, very, very funny in my view, British show. And there's a scene in the show, and this aristocrat is dying. He's got a lot of land, and on one side of his bed is the King of England. On the other side of the bed is the whatever the equivalent of the Pope, right? The what do you call it? The Archduke or whatever of Canterbury, whatever it is of Canterbury. And they're both trying to convince him to give them the land, right? So when you die, give us the land. Oh, and it's making fun of the whole process. It's making fun of the idea of the importance of what happens when you die, but also the idea of religion and what religion can promise you versus what a king can promise you. Because at the end of the day, the king can only threaten him in this life, but he's dying anyway. The archbishop can threaten him with the afterlife. That's eternity. And it's hysterical just to watch this. And what it's making fun of is not human being. It's making fun of institutions that deserve to be made fun of, religion in this case, and a monarchy in this case. And then the idea of you're trying to buy yourself into heaven or try to buy yourself into the favors of a king by what you do after you're dead already. Why do you care after you're dead? So it's that, to me, is clever humor and making fun of things that are really bad. And
that's different than just laser. I'm sorry. That's different than like laser focusing in on just common mistakes.
Yes. And on the other hand, you can see that sometimes slapstick is funny. Whether it's Lorna Hardy or Charlie Chaplin's funny, but Charlie Chaplin is always funny with a bit of there's a theme there, there's a purpose for it. But slapstick can also be funny because it does make fun of the foibles. If you do too much slapstick, it becomes boring, right? So the right kind of balance has to be achieved. But I'm no expert in humor. It just strikes me as, particularly today, I find most comedies, American comedies, are assuming people are stupid and making fun of their stupidity. But it's like there's no alternative. Everybody's stupid and we're just going to... And in that sense, they're making fun of the human race. They're making fun of just human beings, core human beings. And my standard for that is Dumb and Dumber, and every movie made sense that's a comedy. It seems that every movie, the people who are funny in the movie are dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber. And the only question there is, to the extent to which they're extrapolating that on the whole human race. But that's the culture we live in. It's a culture that is not respectful of human achievement, not respectful of individuals and their capacity. So all individuals then are just dumber and dumber. Thanks, Andrew. 734, area code 734.
Hi, Aaron. This is Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer.
I did want to ask about the lockdowns too, since they're starting up again in Europe. Do you honestly think, or that the governments really think that they can totally eradicate this disease off the face of the earth? Is that their goal? I mean, that's probably impossible.
They're buying time. They're buying time until a vaccine. They figure this is the least expensive, politically expensive thing they could do. They figured out that people don't care that much anymore. And they just really are just buying time. So
do you think they're going to force the vaccines? No, I've noticed nobody's really talking about that. Do you think they might actually do that?
Some countries might. I don't think you'll get a forced vaccination in the United States. I don't think they can get away with that. And they don't need to, because it's enough that 50% of Americans get vaccinated and you basically got herd immunity. Plus, if you add the 10 to 20% who already got the virus, you basically are going to get it. So, and my view is if you don't get a vaccination and you get the disease, then you get the disease. If you die, you die. I mean, why? So I don't think in America they're going to force it, but I do think they will try to force it in some countries.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. All right. Let's take a couple of super chat questions and then we'll go back to our list here. I think James, did you haven't asked a question, right?
Hello, Yaron. How are you?
Careful. Yeah.
Yeah. So just a quick, because I'm not up on a lot of modern politics because I can't keep track and it just makes me annoyed. So would you say just in general, like between the left and the right, do you think in your view, like would you say subjectivism or intrinsicism is more so the prevalent method of the way that these people are coming up with their kind of political opinions and views? Like which of those is more prevalent today, do you think?
It's so hard to tell because at the end, intrinsicism is subjectivism. So, because how do you know what's intrinsic to something? You know it because you feel that way, right? But there's a sense in which the right is more intrinsicist and the left is more subjective. But, Trump is a complete subjectivist. There's no intrinsicism there. So it depends which right and it depends which left. And the environmentalists, of course, are complete intrinsicists. So it's both left and right are mixtures of subjectivism and intrinsicism. And at the end, of course, intrinsicism, as I said, is subjectivism. So there's no way around the fact that they're making it up as they go along, and it's driven by their emotions, their emotional attachment to fill in the blank.
Kind of just depends on how deep you go into it to find what the motivation is behind either one.
Absolutely. It's always how deep you go, because sometimes it appears intrinsic, but we know that God doesn't actually speak to them. So where do they hear the voices? Well, it's subjective. Which God, of course. But think about the environmentalists are religious and the religionists are religious. And then there's a bunch of people who are not, what is, are the critical race theory? Are they intrinsicists or subjectivists? Well, in some respect, they're intrinsicists because they've got this, dogma that is there's an intrinsic value or whatever in your colored skin. I mean, they're racist in that sense. But then they're subjectivist about pretty much everything else, because they're postmodernists and everything else, and they're mixed. Everybody out there is just this. Almost everybody. There are very few people who are principled and carry through on those principles.
Not that well thought out. Got it. Thanks.
All right. Is altruism a form of insanity or an understandable error? Why are those two the only alternatives? It's I don't think it's insanity, right? Insanity means there's something wrong, right? It truly is biological. There's something, your mind is not functioning at all. It is something that is an error, but it's not just a mistake. It's an error that people accept and then evade in order to keep hold of. But that's not insanity. That's still, it's pleasing because it's what everybody else wants you to be. It's pleasing because God looks down on you and thinks it's good. I mean, is religion insanity or an understandable error? You can't. It's an error or a product of evasion, or in some cases, I guess it could be insanity. But I think a lot of it is, what is the alternative to being an altruist? How many of us would be non-altruists if not for Ayn Rand? I mean, I wouldn't be. I might be a cynic. I probably would be a cynic because I don't think I could have. I think at the end, I would have come to the conclusion altruism doesn't make any sense. But where would that have left me with? What's the alternative to altruism? Cynicism. There is no values. There's no truth. You just do whatever, right? So I think most people don't know there's an alternative. Even if they've read Ayn Rand, they don't understand that there's an alternative. So I think most people are committing an innocent error in that they don't really know. And that's why they're not consistent altruists either, right? Because they know that's bad. All right, a couple of others. Wow, these are deep questions. Can't you use reason to accomplish an irrational goal? For instance, a perfectly executed bank robbery or Hitler conquering Europe. I mean, it's a great question. And I am not in the best position to give the answer. The answer is no, that's not using reason. That is using a kind of a pseudo reason. It's pretending to be thinking, but it's not actual thought. Leonard Peikoff answers this question in one of his courses. And I remember sitting in the audience and struggling to understand. It's not one of those issues that is, I can easily explain it because I get it completely. But reason involves reality. Reason involves being connected to reality in every step of the logical thought process. Logic means non-contradictory identifications. Well, if you're planning a bank robbery, are there contradictory identifications you would have to make? Yes. Implicitly, the source of wealth, why you want this money that's not yours. So you cannot be consistent. You cannot think it through. You cannot be a consistent applier of reason. So it appears like they're using thought. In a sense, they're using thought in certain aspects of what they're doing, but as an integration, the planned robbery, the invasion of Europe, the extermination of Jews, as a whole, there's no reason there. Even if you take pieces of it, it looks like a thought process from step one to step two. But that's not what thought is. Thought is the totality of it. So you can say, for example, that human beings compartmentalize and they use reason at work, but not in the rest of their life. But then would you say, are they using reason in their life? And you would have to say no, because they're not unifying it, they're not integrating it. A bank robbery is so contradictory. Hitler invading Europe is so contradictory that the contradictions are right there immediately, imminently, that they're not using reason, not in the way we understand reason and thought, even though they're using some of the processes that are similar to what we identify as reason. I think I got that right, and we can certainly ask a philosopher that question and see if we get a deeper response. Does qualified immunity make sense for police officers so they don't have to risk getting sued every time they're a little rough while making an arrest? Well, it depends. So you'd have to have a law that basically said when a lawsuit was reasonable. So it would have to be something like they exhibited gross negligence in the performance of their duty. And it's not clear that they personally would be sued. The department would be sued, and that would give departments motivation to better supervise and train their police forces. So I'm not sure if the liability would be personal or would be a liability of the entity, the organization called the police force. They would then have to suffer the legal costs. So look, liability law in the United States is a disaster today. It's a disaster for all of us. I mean, you can be sued for anything today. And I'd hate to see that applied to cops. What I'd like to see is a rational liability law where it applies to everybody, that if you commit certain acts, gross negligence or truly negligent acts, that you could be sued. But today, you don't have to prove negligence. You just have to prove that you caused harm and you have deep pockets. And they'll come after you, right? So our legal system needs dramatic, significant reform. I used to think that was really, really the most urgent thing we needed. It still is really, really, really urgent, but there's so many other things that it's just one of the many things that need reforming. But liability law, there's a great book by Peter Huber called Liability. I highly, highly recommend it. Not so much as solutions, but as an identification of the problem. Is very philosophical, very intellectual, very good. I think he's in the Manhattan Institute. Peter Huber, the book is called Liability. I think you can get a used copy on Amazon. All right, we're going to go through, you guys. The order has changed because it's changed in front of me. So we're going to start with 917. Was that Andrew?
It is.
Yeah, go for it, Andrew.
Okay. Trigger warning, I'm going to mention Rudy Giuliani.
Uh-oh.
So the tie between Christianity and emotional repression, which is a topic you and I have discussed before on these Q&As. When you brought up about, of course, now his name is
Milken.
escaping
Michael
me. The
Milken.
businessman who he.
Michael Milken.
Okay, Milken. And apparently Milken has forgiven Giuliani, and there's no bad blood between them. It's disturbing, actually. That's the fact. And it strikes me that I've heard Trump actually kind of espouse a similar attitude where he said things like he can basically lambaste somebody and be completely irate with them.
Yep.
And then like the next week he's fine.
Yeah.
It means nothing to
Yep.
him. And I'm just like, that's such a cheap way to emote. And I wonder if, I think there's something to do with, I don't know if it's psychological at root or philosophical, where a lot of men are like this, where they don't feel comfortable hating. And I think if hatred is a kind of thing where, I know, frankly, I don't either. But it's the kind of thing where if you don't get experience with hatred, I think you can be afraid of hatred because it is such an intense amount of energy, and kind of like anything else, you need to know how to harness it and
Absolutely.
use it and not let it take over you.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering, how much do you think of that is kind of repression and also the Christian tie into repression, in the sense that you're told not to hate.
Yep.
And you're told to love everybody, which to me is equivalent to basically
Loving
screwing up your love and hatred emotions. So how do you view that connection?
So I definitely think it's Christianity. I think, I think Christianity pivoted from a pretty hateful religion called Judaism, where God was like, vengeful and hated and pretty brutal, to Christianity, which was really focused on love and meekness and humility and love your enemy. And you can understand it, because Christianity is a religion of the oppressed. It's the religion of the poor. Think about where it comes from, where it starts. It's the religion that lives in the shadow of Rome. And you can't, if you're going to survive as a religion, you better not upset the Romans. You better love your enemy. You better be willing to turn the other cheek. You better be willing to be slaughtered by the lions, because if you don't, you're going to be all slaughtered by the lions. None of you will survive. The Romans were not known for loving their enemy or turning the other cheek or any of that stuff. So it was very much a survival mechanism for a religious cult in a extraordinarily hostile environment of Rome. But it has deep psychological roots. I mean, when you're told to love your enemy, even though nobody takes it seriously, when you're told to turn the other cheek, when you're told to love your neighbor like yourself, none of that is doable, but it creates a certain sense of guilt when you don't experience it, which causes you to repress your emotions. So when you feel this emotion of hate, you go, yeah, but I'm told I shouldn't really feel this. So you repress it, you deny it, you reject it to yourself. And that creates all kinds of psychological BS. Now, that's one cause. With Trump, it's a different cause. Trump and men like Trump and women like Trump. Pragmatism. Pragmatists don't really value anything. And if you don't really value anything, you're not really angry at anybody. You don't really hate anybody, because they don't represent a real threat to anything to you, because you don't really care about anything. So pragmatism eliminates values. And by eliminating values, except the momentary value, right? Pragmatism is, in the moment, I value this. But tomorrow I might value something else. So if somebody interfered with me getting this, I don't hate them anymore, because it's not a value anymore. I've shifted, I've gone to the next one. And, hate is good if it gets you what you need. And if it doesn't get you what you need, then you hug and kiss a brutal dictator, right? If that's going to get you what you need, that's what you do. And everything serves the purpose of the moment. There's no principle, there's no values, there's nothing to guide your emotions. So you're just moving with the tide. You're just drifting. There is nothing is sustainable. Nothing sticks with you because of that. So that again,
Yes.
I think it's worse than repression, because then I think you're not really feeling anything. You're not really alive in some deep sense.
Yeah, I read an article with Trump where the essence of his position on life, I would summarize it as from this article. He talked as deep as he was able to talk about his kind of philosophy of life, and it was like nothing matters.
Yeah.
In essence, nothing matters, because the next day is the next day, and what yesterday doesn't matter.
Pure pragmatism.
You know, it's just like
pure pragmatism. It's exactly nothing matters is a good way to put it. I desire this right now. That's the only thing that matters. And if I have to lie, or if I have to do X or Y or Z, it doesn't matter as long as I get X. That's the only focus. And he really is. I mean, I know a lot of people. I don't want to pick on Trump, although I enjoy that. He really is. There's a certain mentality, and I see it in people. I see it in people all around. Unfortunately, a lot of businessmen have it because they've rejected altruism. They don't have a substitute for altruism, and therefore they pick up kind of a cynical pragmatism, and that destroys them when they get older. It really ruins them, because they can't hold on to anything, because it's a moving target. There's no principles. There's
no values
anchoring them. There are no real values. The values are of kind of, they're fictitious in a sense. They're pretense. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yep. You're unmuted, Daniel.
Thank you. Quick plug for some of your older shows. You have over 1,700 shows on your channel now. The recent shows, you're getting more than 10% of people give thumbs up who view it. Some of those older shows, it's not true. There's not very many thumbs up. So I'm going back through all the old ones and trying to give them all thumbs up. Listen to them and parts of them and give them thumbs up. So other people should do the same too, is my thought. Question back to finance. 30-year bonds back to where it was in March. The yield curve's about as steep as it was briefly in 2016, maybe 2015. Is this purely just a distortion created by the Fed and the election, or do traders, traditionally a steeper or steepening yield curve means traders expect things are going to get better? Do traders think things are going to get better?
I think traders think there's going to be a massive stimulus package. You could see 3 trillion, you could see 5 trillion with the infrastructure and a Green New mini deal, right? Not a 10 trillion, but you could see easily $5-6 trillion coming out of the Biden administration very quickly, particularly if they get the Senate. And if COVID is still around come January, February, they could do something very quickly. So traders are expecting that will be, funnily enough, bullish for markets, because the short-term impact of that is positive, because people will get money, they'll consume, things will get, but it's also inflationary in a way that we haven't seen anything. Now, potentially, I've called him, it's easy to call inflation, and it never seems to really happen because we don't have the velocity of money that we used to have, but we've never printed as much money as we're about to. We've never engaged in this kind of monetary experiment, I think, since the 1970s, 60s or 70s. I really think this time it's going to happen. We're going to get, and I think that's what the 30-year bond is really pricing. I think they're pricing inflation expectations. They're not pricing high GDP numbers. I think that would be delusional, although GDP will go up because GDP captures government spending. And if government spends, GDP goes up. GDP was up in 1942, the first full year of American involvement in World War II. It was up like 12%. Even though quality standard of living plummeted, the government was spending a lot of money, so GDP went up. So, but everybody knows that. I think everybody I talk to realizes that we're in for stagnation of one form or another, whether with inflation, without it. So I don't think the 30-year bonds are expecting real 4 to 5% or even 3%, never mind 2 to 3% economic growth. I think what they're really targeting is inflation. And I think justifiably so. So in this sense, I think the bond market's being rational. And at some point, it's going to be interesting to see if the Fed tries to raise short-term rates. Last time they tried was 2018. The markets just plummeted, and they quickly reversed themselves. What Paul Volcker understood, which nobody since has understood, is that you cannot delay the pain forever. The pain has to come at some point. And to Paul Volcker's unbelievable credit, right, in a mixed economy with all the caveats involved with the errors of running a Fed, he drove interest rates through the roof.
21% overnight. Yeah.
21% overnight. The economy spiraled into a deep recession in 81. And this, I'm sure Ronald Reagan was unhappy with that. He just got elected. It was his economy. He owned it. But then because he let it happen, and Ronald Reagan did not react with Dodd-Frank and more regulations and more controls, but just let it happen in a sense, the recovery from that was unbelievable. Starting in, I forget the exact date, in 1982, the stock market just took off and never stopped. And, still in a sense, we're still in that bull market. And interest rates have come down since then, right? Every year, pretty much. And there's been a bull market in bonds as well, since then. So starting with Alan Greenspan, tragically, Federal Reserve chairmen are scared, they're petrified of the market. And they refuse to take the pain when the pain is needed. And we got a financial crisis because of that. And you could argue that part of the financial crisis, the economic crisis that we're going to be experiencing in the near term, is because during COVID, the Fed bailed everybody out, including companies that needed to go bankrupt because they're old economy and they don't produce and they need to go bankrupt. And the capital needs to be deployed to better uses, but we wouldn't let them. So now they're still hanging around, sucking up capital so the capital is going to zombie companies and to the government. And there's going to be less and less and less capital to real producers. And as a consequence, I just don't see where economic growth can come from. So I think it's inflation. I think it's inflation expectations that are increased. I'm relieved to see it. It gives me, in a sense, that I think the bond market is being rational. It's not always, but in this sense, I think it is.
Remember when we were horrified at a $2 trillion TARP program in 1 year? $2 trillion in 1 year. Oh my God.
And TARP, to its credit, I hate to say that, to its credit, all the money in TARP came back to the government. So it wasn't a permanent increase in the supply of money. And indeed, one of the things that horrifies me is they made money on TARP. Yeah. They made a profit, which means they're more likely to do it again in the future because it was, quote, a success. Same thing with the auto bailouts. They actually made money off of them. So it's deemed a success. But remember when Obama proposed in 2009, I remember this well, a $900 billion stimulus package. Mm-hmm. Republicans were apoplectic. Yes. It was the end of the world as we know it. It was going to be a disaster. And indeed, I think it was a disaster. We didn't recover. We didn't really recover from the Great Recession. Economic growth was static for a decade. In spite of Trump saying greatest economy ever, economic growth never broke really 3%. But people were apoplectic. The world was going to end. And now it's Republicans voting in $3.9 trillion of stimulus, another $500 McConnell just approved. Trump wants $2+ trillion. So even if Trump gets reelected, we're going to get a $2+ trillion stimulus package. And this is why I've said many shows over the last couple of years, there's no opposition party. Republicans are good, used to be a decent opposition party. Now there's no opposition party. It's status of the left and status of the right, and it's competition on who can take over more, who can grab power more. And maybe that'll change if somehow the Republicans can hold on to the Senate, maybe by one senator. They're gonna lose some Senate seats. So if they can keep 51 seats, maybe they'll revert to being a decent opposition party. But it looks right now that they're going to lose the Senate as well. And let's hope they don't lose it by a lot of seats, because then, if they lose by 1 or 2, then there's still some Democrats who come from conservative red states that are going to have to moderate what the left wants to do. But if the Democrats pick up, significant numbers in the Senate, it's going to be a floodgate of leftist policies, from which I'm going to be blamed for. I know. I caused Trump to lose. And
exactly. It was you.
If only I had that power. James.
Okay, so you have a full-time career in the business world, and you want to get into the intellectual field. Of course, you're a studying budding objectivist. What route, if you had to do what you're doing over again, what route do you think would be like the most, I don't know, beneficial? Or, I mean, obviously based on kind of where your interests are, but like, how do you kind of make a path for that?
You don't want to give up the business. You want to be able to do both.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's like I don't anticipate making money from doing anything with objectivism, like, for a while at least. But
yeah, but you have to realize you're not going to be as good at the business that you're at if you're going to do this, right? Because a career, particularly when you're young and building it requires your full focus and attention. I'd say, start by deep dive, studying objectivism. I would sign up to the OAC. I would really study the ideas as much as possible. Then I would focus on those areas in the intellectual world that interest you. So, maybe it's business, but the intellectual side of business. Maybe it's, leadership. Maybe it's finance. Maybe it's history. Or energy, like Alex Epstein or something. Find the niche that you find particularly interesting, and just read. Don't watch videos. Read, right? And really get to know the field while you are learning objectivism in depth. And just spend some years studying. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, write. Writing is crucial, right? Don't use me as an example. Write. Use Don as an example. Don is a better example. Don Watkins. And in the beginning, it'll suck. It just will. I mean, everybody sucks in the beginning at writing. Writing is really hard. And you'll keep getting better at it. Particularly if you're open to criticism and you receive it, and just start a blog, write about the area of expertise, have a pseudonym so you don't jeopardize your business side of it. But focus. Don't try to take on the world because you'll get lost, right? Try to take on one field from an objectivist perspective and really dig deep into that field, and read a lot, and then write, and keep it going. And then at some point you might build up an audience, or you might want to go and work for the Iron Man Institute, or you might start a podcast, or you might get a sense, okay, now I can make a living at it. Now I can really devote full time to it. But you've got to build up to that. It's very hard. And I mentioned this once, a lot of people were insulted by it. It's very hard to be a young intellectual. Now, if you're a leftist or a conservative, it's easy because you don't really have to know anything, right? You can BS yourself, and you just have to be able to cite the dogma. But there is no dogma in objectivism. You actually have to know it. And to actually know it, you need some life experience. So I once said, and this is not me, it's Ayn Rand, as told to me by Leonard Peikoff, that she didn't take anybody, a philosopher, seriously until they reached the age of 40.
Under 40, yeah.
And I get that, right? I took over the Iron Man Institute. I was 39 and a half, right? But I get it. There's a certain life experience that you have. There's a certain maturity. There's a certain integration. And think about knowledge, the importance of integration and knowledge. It's something people don't. You've got to make the connections. You've got to let your mind constantly do that. You got to train your mind to do it. And that takes energy and resources, mental resources. So it takes time. It's doable again. But again, I think too many people look at the left and look at the conservatives and say, hey, he's 28 and Charlie Cook, I think, is 24 and he's like this world-renowned, intellectual of the right. Yeah, because, he doesn't have to know anything. But as objectivists, you actually have to know something.
Yeah, I definitely struggled, like, because I think that's a conflict for me of, the company that I worked for and kind of like growing my career. A lot of the ideas that the company looks at or, believes in are not necessarily in line with objectivism. And it's like how to try and mesh those two or keep them completely separate, like you said,
Yep.
So I'm trying to kind of wrestle with that a little bit too.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. It's not easy. Good luck. All right, Roy.
There we go. First, I'm delighted to hear you talk about Blackadder because I think it's the funniest and sharpest comedy series in the history of the world.
It's
In fact, I
brilliant.
was going to recommend it
It's brilliant.
one evening, and it's amazing. There were I think four different series.
Four
different
seasons.
periods.
4 seasons. First one is, I can't remember who was king, but each
Richard
series
III.
is set in a different period of British history.
Right, exactly, Richard III, and then right.
It's brilliant. And the last one is World War I, during World War I. Shut up,
Right.
Siri. The last one is actually tragic comic, but really, because it's World War I, but really brilliantly done and very poignant.
Yeah, good. Now, my question is, several weeks ago, I saw the 4 shows you did with David Pakman, the debates / interviews, or interviews / debates. And I was wondering what your assessment was of the 4 and what the response has been or was.
I thought I did poorly on the first one. I thought I did well on the other 3. I thought they were good. The first one, there was one question I just got wrong. One issue I just got wrong, and then there's an issue of how to explain, and I can't remember what it is. Something about he goes. I can't remember what it was, but I just didn't get it quite right. In terms, I didn't concretize it well. But then I thought the other 3 were good. I've gotten. I mean, I don't know what kind of impact they have, right? But I do get people coming to my show saying, "We saw you for the first time on Pakman, and it led us to come to your show, and now we're reading Ayn Rand." So in that sense, even if it's just a handful of people, it's a huge success. Now, I don't know how many, hard to tell, but I'm happy with doing them, and so we're thinking about doing something a little crazy. So we're thinking of doing I'm curious what you guys think. Thinking of doing a debate you're on Brooke thing, right? I'll pay you to debate me, and I'll actually have one of you decide who won the debate. So we'll have like 10-minute debates or 15-minute debates. And one of my audience will get to decide who won or who lost the debate. But I'll pay people anyway. And I think we'll do it with socialists, because otherwise all the anarchists will come out of the woodwork wanting to debate me, and I'll be bored stiff. But we'll try to get socialists to debate me and maybe create some buzz within the socialist community. Go debate your on, catch them on something. I don't know if it'll work, but that'll be something we might try to get stuff going and to get the debate going. Christian, thank you. Incredibly generous. Somebody just get us.
I can't imagine any of us saying the socialist won.
No, I know, but it's not an issue of who wins or who loses. They get paid no matter what. So it's more the entertainment value. But yeah, it's. So I thought they were good. I mean, I don't know what your assessment was, Roy, but I thought they were good, and I do more of them if I could.
No, I'm in sync with you. I think the first one was a little off. It was just like, and then thought you were really good form in the others, but I found it very frustrating because he's obviously not dumb, he's bright, but he just fell for the liberal stuff, even though he claims to be more independent. So for example, when he said, when we were talking about force, and he said, well, of course, we'll use the broader definition of force that includes. You said, no, force is force. It doesn't include influence and, having a contrary opinion. So I thought you were in good form then.
Yeah, thanks.
But I found it a frustrating experience.
It's very frustrating. I prefer the Dave Rubin-like, interviews, that are calm, and you get to make your full points, and you get you will see the Lex Friedman is going to come out hopefully in the next few days. I think that one is very similar to that in sense of it's calm, it's more philosophical, it's more cordial, and I think I get more converts that way. It's hard to make a point when the other side is not connected to reality.
Mm.
When reality is not their standard. Great, thanks, Roy. Nick.
Thanks.
Yeah, Aaron. I had a question regarding Ayn Rand's work. Her first major work was in 1936, We the Living. Then 7 years later, she wrote The Fountainhead in 43. And in 1957, obviously her magnum opus, Atlas Shrugged. Now, I just wanted your opinion, or if you've heard others comment, both how her work has evolved both thematically and stylistically. There's a 21-year gap between her works. I mean, she didn't, you know what I mean? There was an evolution there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can see it stylistically. You can see it in the depth of characters. The just her writing is so much better, I think, in Atlas Shrugged. I mean, it's good in We the Living, but it really flourishes in Atlas Shrugged. I mean, think about the descriptions of the tree, the tree that's rotted in the inside. Think about I mean, my favorite scene in Atlas Shrugged, I think the most powerful emotional scene for me in Atlas Shrugged, is when Dagny and Reardon are writing the John Galt line, and they're in the engine room, and she's describing what Dagny is feeling, and it's sexual. It's like sex, right? It's like the depth of emotion, the intensity of the feeling, the intensity of the experience, the pride that is involved, and everything that's happening on the train. And it's no accident, by the way, because it's so sexual, that scene has to end with Reardon and Dagny having sex, right? In Wyatt's house afterwards, because it has to lead to that. It has to get the full sexual climax. And those kind of descriptions, that kind of emotional intensity, that kind of depth into the soul of the characters, I don't think you get in We the Living. I mean, We the Living is incredibly powerful, but and then the complexity of the plot, all the elements that are in the We the Living, including, men who are in conflict with each other, who love the same woman. All of that is in Atlas Shrugged, but at a much more developed, interesting, deeper level and greater intensity. And then, of course, philosophically, there are big development. I don't think there's anything in We the Living that contradicts what comes later, although she made some changes later on to it to just make finer points about certain passages. But by Atlas Shrugged, she has a fully developed philosophical system. In We the Living, she has the beginnings, she has an outline of a philosophical system. In Fountainhead, the ethics are coming together, right? And in Atlas Shrugged, it's all done, right? It's the whole system is there. So you definitely see a significant progression, both in quality of writing and in the scope of the philosophical of her philosophy as presented. All right. Thanks, Nick. Tom.
Thanks, Yaron. So I understand that you wear a mask and have advocated mask wearing on this show. So my question is, do masks work? And if your response to that is yes, how do we know that enough to subscribe to choosing to wear them by an informed choice, not simply by a mandate or an act of faith that they're working?
Well, I mean, I think we don't know fully the extent to which they work. We understand some of the mechanisms, but we don't fully understand them, and we don't have yet a good sense of the probabilities of how much they work. But, you know, there's significant evidence coming out in the scientific literature that they do work. There's an understanding about how they block viruses. So people say things like, the virus is smaller than the holes in the mask it goes through. But there's a number of flaws in that argument. One is the virus is never alone. It's usually a part of a water particle, and the water particle within which the virus is bigger than the holes in the mask, and it doesn't get through. There's also, and I forget the physics term for it, there's also forces, magnetic forces and other forces in the material in the mask that draw the virus, prevent it from going through. So it's not just size, it's not just a physical size. It's also the interaction between the material of the mask and the material of the thing. We know, for example, that a M95 or whatever it's called mask is used in hospitals, clearly proven, and is used every day to prevent viruses from going in and out, you infecting patients and patients infecting you. We know that surgical masks at least work for some things because surgeons wear them. And there's a huge body of evidence that is good for surgery. So I would say that logic, understanding of the physics of it, and then the use of masks by doctors in hospitals and nurses in all evidence that in certain contexts, masks work. I'd also add that in a sense, anecdotally, the fact that in Asia, they use so many masks, and maybe correlation is not causation here, and you could make that argument. But the fact is that Asia has done like a gazillion times better than we have. To a large extent because they test, trace, isolate, but also because they wear masks. And it's just a given that they wear masks. It's not required, but they just do. And if you've been to Asia, you know that they wear masks during flu season, even when there's no COVID. So I think when you add up all of that, I would say there's a very, very good chance that in closed environments, in environments where the air does not circulate much, where there is reasonable social distancing. I think if you scrunch up against one another, I'm not sure the mask works anymore. But if there's a reasonable amount of masks work, if you just think of the physics of it, even if the virus gets through the mask slows it down. By slowing it down, causes it to drop to the ground faster. It spends less time in the air. There's so many just common sense plus science plus evidence plus what people are doing that suggests that if you go into an elevator with a bunch of other people, you're probably safer if you wear a mask than you're not wearing a mask. To me, it's I can't prove it, so I say it's common sense, but I think it's more than common sense. I think there's real scientific evidence here as well. Now, outdoors, at the beach, where there's a breeze, where you're 12 feet away from everybody else, yeah, it's stupid to wear a mask, right? There's no reason to wear a mask. But indoors, when you're less than 6 feet apart from each other, and where there's not great circulation of air, and we know air conditioning filters these things through, wearing a mask creates one more barrier between you and the virus. It's a no-brainer in my mind. It's just a no-brainer. Now, the question is, do you care if you get the virus, right? How much do you care, right? Is the convenience worth it? So if you're young, maybe you don't care, and that can be rational. If you're 85 and the people around you might be infected, you should wear a mask. And if you care, right? Some 85-year-olds say, the hassle of wearing it, I'm going to die anyway in the next 2 years. What the hell? And that's rational too. But you have to make that estimate for your own life. But to me, if you're concerned about the virus, a mask reduces, I think, significantly the probability that you will get it from somebody else in your close environment in an indoor space.
So as far as limitations, though, what you're describing would then be applicable to any other type of communicable ailment. So what's the limitation?
Yeah, I mean, I
are
think
we wearing masks all the time going forward as a mitigation factor against any type of communicable disease?
No, I mean, it depends on how bad the disease is. It depends on how communicable it is, right? How easy it is to get it from other people. So some people who might have a high probability of dying if they get the flu might make sense for them to wear a mask when they interact with other people. Most people, the flu is no big deal, or it's not a big deal enough to wear a mask for. Asians don't like the flu, right? They don't mind wearing masks, so they wear them. I wouldn't wear a mask. I probably wouldn't wear a mask in most situations, even with COVID, unless I was concerned about the other person getting it. So I've said this before. I have a friend, 87 years old. When I go see him, I get a test before that because I don't want to wear a mask, right? I'd like to be able to see him and him to see me. So I get tested before it because I know that if he gets it, he'll die. And I don't want to be the one giving it to him, right? I don't want him to get it. So I get a test. If I couldn't get a test, I'd wear a mask when I interact with him. Now, if there was another disease I had or thought I might have that would kill him, and a mask would help, I'd wear a mask. So it's completely contextual. It's completely situational. It's completely within the scope of your decision-making about the type of disease. But look, let's say MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory MERS, what's the S stands for? Syndrome, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. Basically, if you get it, 50% of the people who get it die. I think that's the number. Maybe it's 40%, right?
I heard
40 to
that,
50% of the people get it die. Right now, it's very hard to get it. I basically have to lick you. And basically people get it from camels, and they basically get it because they lick you.
Yeah, I've heard human-to-human transmission is extremely rare.
Yeah, but imagine it wasn't. Imagine MERS was in the air, and it was not easy to get, but it was likely to get, right? If you were in an elevator stuck with somebody who had it, you would get it. Would you wear a mask? Yeah. If you thought it would slow it down. So you have to make the decision on a virus by virus basis, on a situation by situation basis, who you're with, what's the context, how deadly is the disease, and how communicable is it? All of us need to make those assessments within the context of our values. That's why the government cannot make that decision for us. We have to make it. And, the 87-year-old has to make the decision, is another few years of life worth it? To the inconvenience or not. Only he can make that decision within the context of his values. That's why it cannot be forced. It cannot be a decision made from the top. But yeah, we should make it. I mean, I've been tested because I travel a lot, for hepatitis. Hepatitis, I think, is a communicable disease. I'm not sure exactly how you get it from person to person. But if I tested positive, it's a problem. I would have to change some of the way I live. If you test positive for HIV, you would have to change some of how you live in terms of how you interact with other people, sexually at least. So each disease is going to cause you each communicable disease is going to cause you to think about how you interact. Now, a cold is not, but when I ran the institute, I would tell people, if you got a cold, don't come to work because I don't want you cold. I don't want to get it from you. So stay home if you've got a cold, even if you want to work. You work from home, whatever. Don't come to work because I don't want to get you a cold. And I certainly don't want to get you a flu. So we know this about communicable diseases.
Well, what about erring on the side of caution then in the way you're describing that you don't know because you're asymptomatic that you have any type of a communicable ailment? Why then wouldn't you then advocate for us to wear masks all the time as a safety precautionary measure?
Because I don't believe in the precautionary principle. There has to be a reason for you to think you might have it. With COVID, because we know that asymptomatic people do give it, because we know that, 6 million people have had it in the United States, probably 20 to 30 million Americans have had it, maybe more. It's in the air, it's out there, it's everywhere. Then you're careful because it's a problem. So when there's no problem, why be careful, right? When the problem rears its ugly head, then you have to start thinking about, should I wear a mask or shouldn't I wear a mask? But COVID is a reality. It's not a myth. It really is here.
I'm not arguing that it's a myth. I think that's a straw man argument. But what I'm saying is that what you're describing, if we replace the word coronavirus with the flu, everything else is the same, right? The flu exists. It has existed for a long time. Many people, many thousands, tens of thousands of people every year die from it. Malaria is a similar type ailment.
Yeah.
Why are we not then advocating for similar type precautionary measures along the same lines? Why do people in tropical climates not wear full body plastic suits so that they don't contract malaria from mosquito bites?
Well, because they can't live that way. And
Right.
but it is a problem, right? So they do live with nets laced with DDT, which could be harmful for other things if in certain quantities. I would suggest using more DDT if malaria was a big problem. I would suggest bioengineering mosquitoes, to eradicate the species of mosquitoes that carries malaria. The fact that malaria exists would cause me to act, not to passively say, well, malaria is here, so I'm not going to do anything about it. It's just, you have to look for the right kind of response. Once we get a vaccine, there's no point in wearing a mask if you're vaccinated, right? So that's odd. So you want to look for solutions. Now, with the flu, most of us have come to the conclusion that the risk is worth it. With COVID, because certainly early on, death rates from COVID were multiples of death rates from the flu, multiples of 5 and 6, which is significant. So instead of 0.1, it was 0.6. That's a big difference. We decided, some of us decided, that in this case, it's worth it to wear a mask. If there was a really, really bad flu season one year, a lot of people were getting it and it was particularly severe, I might wear a mask. I mean, I don't think that, in Asian cultures, for example, they came to the conclusion, many people, not everybody, some people in Tokyo came to the conclusion that the flu was so inconvenient that they would rather wear a mask. So my point is, you have to make a decision based on the information you know at the time, based on your values, based on what you think is right to do, given the information you have. And you don't assume the worst, right? There's no COVID, there's no flu, and you're going to put on a mask. That would be silly. But in flu season, let's say you've got the flu season and I don't know, your kids are getting married in a few weeks and you really, really, really don't want to get the flu. And you're going to be stuck in an airplane and you're going to go up elevators with lots of people. And you know from past years that you're susceptible and you didn't get vaccinated or the vaccine this year is not right for the flu strain. Would you wear a mask? I think it would be a rational thing to do is to wear a mask to say, I don't want to risk getting the flu this year because I don't want to miss the wedding, right? Or something like that, right? I'm making stuff up. I'm trying to illustrate that you have to take all the evidence into account and make the best rational decision you can on the basis of the facts.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent in your flu example, but only to the extent to which a mask can be effective, right? So
Yes,
it
but
becomes a rational decision if you decide to do it based on the understanding that it would have some efficacy.
If you think masks don't have any efficacy, obviously don't use them. But I would look into it because I don't think that's true. I think masks are efficacious. They're not 100%. They're far from 100%. But I think they are efficacious at stopping viruses, at stopping the flu, at stopping, at least to some extent, and stopping COVID. And masks are not going to stop HIV, obviously.
But you're not aware of any double-blind studies or anything along those lines that have shown this to be the case with not just coronavirus, but viruses in general?
Next time I have Amisha Dulja on the show, I'll ask him. I don't know. I've seen, but I haven't dug into it because I did my COVID thing and I'm trying to get away from it. So I haven't been keeping up with the literature. I have seen, because I get regular emails from Johns Hopkins University with all the most recent studies. I have seen some reports of studies that show the masks are effective, but I'm very, very reluctant to use those without digging deep into them and getting to know the methodology and double blind and whether the sample sizes were big enough and all the I'm skeptical of statistics and how people use them, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have some studies. Look, CDC, Amisha Dulja, a lot of doctors were very skeptical of masks before COVID. Obviously, Asians were not. It looks like doctors in the US and researchers in the US have changed their minds, not people that have changed their mind for political reasons, because they don't have anything political. Amesh certainly doesn't. And I know other doctors who don't. They've changed their mind about masks. We'd have to dig deeper into why they changed their minds and what research they're basing that and how confident they are in it. But again, I think, to me, it just makes common sense. It just seems like any barrier you put between me and another person is going to reduce the probability that they get infected from me and I get infected from them.
So would you then revise your statement that you had made to Kiera Peikoff back in August, saying that masks are political?
I think that people's responses to masks are political. There's no question in my mind.
But how do you make that determination if you're saying that there's
Because
no
I can see how they
objective?
behave. I can see they behave. You got the mask Gestapo, where leftists, not even leftists, just people who are panicking and are nuts, want you to wear a mask outdoors, while you're running, where there's a breeze and where the science is zero that masks matter, or that you can even give COVID or get COVID in those circumstances. And you've got people on the right who, as a principle, not having researched it and thoughtfully about it, are claiming that is their God-given right not to wear a mask, and no scientific evidence would ever change their minds. I think it's very political. I think the whole debate is political. It's one of the problems of discussing it. It's because it's infused now with politics. So if you say, I think masks reduce the probability of getting COVID, you're branded a leftist. And if you say, no, I've looked at the scientific evidence and I think masks are no good, you're branded a right-wing Trumpist. And it's all politics. And what is part of the fact that I don't trust the studies, and part of the reason why I don't have studies at my fingertips, is because I think even the media is afraid of, depending on the media, is afraid of disclosing studies and really being scientific, because they don't want to be, because it's all political. It's not about science. It's not about facts. It's not about reality. If it was, I think most people would have this curious attitude towards masks. I wonder if they work or they don't work. Let me think about it. Let me go read the studies, or let me ask my doctor. Let me do what my physician tells me to do, right? Like I do on other health-related issues. But I don't see that curiosity among people. I see people taking stands based on politics, not based on science or based on curiosity. I would love to see people curious. People saying, I don't know. I wonder. But that's not what I see.
Yeah, I mean, I can say certainly I'm curious, and
I'm not accusing you, Tom, of anything, right?
No, I know, and this isn't personal.
I'm saying out there, when I look out there into the world, when I see the people who are trying to force us to wear masks on the one hand, and the people who say, no, the masks are the biggest violation of my liberties ever, all I see is politics. I don't see curiosity in science.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a desperate need, and I think I speak personally that I have this desperate need to understand if it is effective, so I can make an informed decision. And it seems like it's still up in the air. So to claim that to do it or not do it is some sort of a political thing, I guess, is I'm
saying that most people are using it, are doing it or not doing it based on a political thing. I'm not saying any particular individual's choice is political. I'm saying as a broad observation, it has become completely politicized in the culture.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the time.
Sure. Yep. George.
All right. Before my question, I just want to give a shout out to Troy for bankrolling the series on the virtues.
Excellent.
I'm really enjoying it. Troy, if you're listening, if you're ever in Oklahoma or Texas, find me, dinner and drinks around me.
He's in Australia. Maybe, when the borders open up.
If he's allowed to get out. So shifting topics away from COVID into philosophy, what does the objectivism mean by the ego? Is it a concept? Is it a sense of life, a sense of self, or is it a more the psychological package of functions? And I guess as an application, we often say about athletes or celebrities, that guy has a big ego, but you know what? He's got the chops to back it up.
Yep.
How would an objectivist react to that statement? Assessing someone's ego and saying, well, at least he backs it up.
Well, I think there's a lot of altruism just in that assessment, right? He's got a big ego as a negative. Oh, but he's got the chops to back it up, so that's okay. Because in sports, somehow having an ego is okay. Nobody would ever say that about a CEO. Oh, he's got a big ego, but he's made $1 gazillion worth of wealth for his shareholders. Therefore, he's got the chops to back it up. Nobody would say that. Maybe with Steve Jobs, but very few other people. I think it's all of the above. I think one of the things that you have to realize in objectivism is, ego is obviously a concept. It's an abstraction, but it's an abstraction filled with content. And that content is the psychological, it's your decisions, it's who you are. It's you in the spiritual sense versus you in the material sense. It's everything that you have made of yourself or everything you've defaulted into, depending on whether you have an ego in that sense or not. Having an ego is a compliment because having an ego suggests that you've made something, you've built something, you've created something, and you're expressing it through your pride in your own achievements. And that's what we mean with the athlete, right? They have a sense of their own accomplishments, and they're not afraid to express that sense of their own accomplishment. I wish everybody was like that. First of all, I wish everybody was accomplished, and then I wish they all had a sense of their own accomplishments. So, but willing to express that. So, I think it's everything. It's the psychology, it's the psychological content, but it's what Ayn Rand means by a soul, and what she means by creating your own soul, making your own soul. Through your decisions, through your choices. Through your actions. Does that make sense?
Yep, definitely.
Great. And thank you for liking the series on the ethics. We've got formal and formal virtues, and then we've got some other stuff that Troy has funded as well about kind of pivoting to kind of what's wrong with some of the Christian virtues and vices, which I think is going to be really interesting. So yeah, I enjoy doing those shows. Little sometimes out of my depth, I feel, but I think even though it's introductory, there's enough value there for people to gain from. Yeah, I'd love to do more of those, not less. All right, let's see. I think Derek is our last question.
Yeah, no, I guess I would just echo what George said about loving that series. I know it's not great for your viewership, but I too love the positive shows. So and I guess I don't actually have a question. I just want to also echo what Daniel had said about going back to some of the older material. I just went through the defense of finance lectures and found them really eye-opening and helped me frame a complicated topic that I guess I never really understood as well as I thought I had. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really proud of those kind of the courses that I did, the finance ones, the Middle East ones, the Islamism ones. I'm really happy with those. They turned out really well, and I covered a lot of material in a pretty brief period, kind of in a pretty condensed way. And I hope more people listen to them, because I think there's real value there, and value that, political commentary you can get in other places and stuff like that. But those courses, you're just not going to get that material anywhere. It is a unique kind of packaging that I put together. And yeah, I like the positive shows too, and I'm hoping to do more of those as we move forward. I'm hoping that we're building an audience that is open to those, and that there's enough, the last few months, there's been enough support on the SuperChat and on the monthly contributions that, so the viewership is down. It doesn't really matter, because it's not affecting the bottom line in a sense, because the people who are supporting the show continue to listen or continue to support it and are liking the kind of shows that I do. And at the end of the day, the quality is more important than the quantity, right? So if I can get to a smaller quantity, but deeper and more intense, and take the ideas more seriously and impact their lives, and then go and change the world, that is going to have a more profound impact on me and on the world than if I just get to lots of people. And those are and that smaller group is also the group that supports me financially. So it's win-win-win, right? So from Troy to everybody else, it's a win-win-win. And I'm definitely open to more positive topics. I like this idea of people sponsoring topics. So if anybody wants to spend $1,000 on sponsoring a topic, I'm eager to do it and happy to do it. I think last time I said, if somebody wants me to review a movie, we can do that. I'll do that for $500. So it's a nice way for me to make some money and to fund what I'm doing. And at the same time, give you the opportunity to kind of have input into the show. And then of course we have these Q&As, which again, we don't get a lot of viewership, but I think ways in which we sustain the show financially. You guys get a perk, and the super chat is doing quite well today. So it's again win-win for everybody. It's a really nice. I mean, we've come up with a nice. I mean, it seems like there's a nice formula now rolling here, and it's working. So hopefully we can keep it going. Thank you. Thanks to all of you guys for the support. All right, let's try to do a few more super chats. We're approaching 2 hours, and then we'll call it a night. And I'll keep the other super chats for the next show. In a talk you gave to high school students, you said nobody really cares about you except your parents. Isn't that depressing? I can't remember saying that. Sometimes you say stuff in a talk to shake people up. You do it to create cognitive dissonance. So there's a sense in which that is true. And there's a sense in which, as an adult, nobody really cares about you, except maybe your spouse. So you better care about yourself. You better figure it out. Now, nobody's gonna take care of you. Nobody's gonna support you. You better do it yourself. It's kind of a wake-up call. So my guess is that the reason I did it for the high school students was more as a shake them up than I literally think that, right? I mean, I care about them. That's why I'm giving the talk. So a lot of people care about them. Their teachers care about them. But in the sense that your life is yours, you have to care deeply about your life. Nobody else is going to teach you how to do that. Nobody else is going to do it for you. That's, I guess, the sense in which I meant it. I'm not sure I would say it again. And again, I did it for cognitive dissonance kind of. Sometimes I tell people think that everything I say in a talk, I literally mean. Every story I tell in a talk is literally true. And no, I mean, this is drama, and sometimes you take things out of proportion, to make a point, to emphasize. You would never write that in a book. You would never write it in an article. A talk is different. A talk has a dramatic element to it. It has a show element to it, particularly when you're doing extemporaneously. Plus, when you're extemporaneous, just like on these shows, sometimes I say things that are wrong. I know that's shocking, but sometimes I say things that are just wrong, and hopefully you guys call me on them when I do. It's like that on that David Pakman interview thing. I got a bunch of emails from people, some nice about it, some not so nice about it. Yuan, how could you say that? You should know objectivism better than that. Well, you try it sometime. It ain't easy to be in the spotlight and always be right. I think I bat pretty well. Okay, the freedom movement had so much momentum in the 80s and the 90s. What happened? How did we let it slip away? I think there's more momentum today than there was back in the 80s and 90s. I was around in the 80s and 90s. I don't think the freedom movement was that energized. I mean, they were optimistic because they viewed Ronald Reagan as an ally, but that was their mistake. Part of the reason they didn't succeed as much as they didn't view Ronald Reagan as, in a sense, the enemy, which he was. The real freedom movement, the objectivist movement, the real free market movement is bigger today than it was in the 80s and 90s. There was almost nobody in the 80s and 90s. Now you have a free market economist in almost every economics department in the country. You have free market historians, free market, all kinds of fields and all kinds of areas. You have objectivists at universities teaching anyway from Brad Thompson to Tara Smith to Greg Salmieri, and then you've got a movement, an objectivist movement that's far bigger than it was back then. No, when I go to free market conferences and I meet free market intellectuals, the number of free market intellectuals in the world today is dramatically bigger than it was in 1980s. The difference was the political environment seemed falsely to be moving us towards freedom, Reagan and Thatcher. But anybody who understood philosophy, i.e. objectivists, knew that that was a fake signal. And indeed, objectivists warned us. And objectivists, the objtivist intellectuals told us, don't believe it. It's not happening. It's fake. And it turned out that, yeah, it was this blip and it didn't last. Why doesn't people criticizing and attacking you all the time weigh you down and make you doubt yourself and what you know to be true? Well, let me say this. I wouldn't say it doesn't wear me down. It definitely, there's a price to pay. You can't not feel it, right? Because it's everywhere, man. And you open up Facebook and you open up this, and it's personal and it's political and it's on every front. And then anyway, from former board members to just a casual listener to the show, constantly at you and attacking you. So there's definitely a sense in which it weighs you down. I mean, I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but what I do is not easy. It's not easy to sustain because it's wearing down. The way I cope with it is a number of things. One is I'm confident in my own view. This is reality. This is the truth. Again, I make mistakes, but I'm not wrong in any kind of fundamental sense. And I know that, and the personal attacks and all that, they're just wrong. The people there are wrong, and it's their problem. They are the ones committing the error. They're the ones committing the mistake, and it's on them. It's not on me. And then you guys make it helpful. If nobody showed up and said, you caused me to read Ayn Rand, or you inspired me to change careers, or like you guys do almost every show, I get one comment like that, then it would be really impossible to do the show. So the positive feedback I get from you guys is unbelievably valuable, and it helps. It justifies the wear and tear, if you will. So it's not that the stuff doesn't drag and doesn't weigh you down, but the good outweighs the bad. It just does. And if you're confident in life and you enjoy what you do, and I do enjoy what I do, then it only goes as I mean, I don't want to sound like an Ayn Rand hero from a novelist, because I'm not, and it seems pretentious, but it only goes so deep. It only goes so deep because I have reality on my side, and I have you guys on my side. Which helps a lot. Okay, 3 quick ones. I think they're quick. I've been listening a lot to talks about Uncle Agate. He is very impressive and has a lot of gravitas. ARI really needs to get him out there more. I agree completely. He was my first hire. I love Uncle. I think he's really, really, really good. I think he's an undervalued asset in objectivism. And every time he's out there, I'm impressed, and I know him well, and he still blows me away anew every single time. He just he just celebrated his 20th anniversary at the Institute. So I hired him 20 years ago, October 20 years ago. So it's best hire I made. What's the difference between suppressing, repressing, and rationally controlling your emotions? Well, suppressing is keeping them down. I think suppressing and repressing are probably very similar concepts. We'd have to ask a psychologist what the difference is. Rationally controlling is rationally controlling. It's knowing you have the emotion, recognizing the emotion, trying to understand the emotion, and then saying, I don't think it's a good indication of what I should do. It's not it's not cognition. I'm not going to ignore it. I want to understand what it is and where it comes from. And it's important that it's there. I recognize it, but here's what reason guides me to do. And this is what I'm going to do. That's what it means to rationally control your emotions. Repressing and suppressing means, in a sense, ignoring, pushing to the side, pretending it didn't happen, evading it in some way. And people get very good at that, and then they stop feeling. They stop experiencing the emotions. Why is mathematics education so poor in the States? Not sure if you have any thoughts on that. Well, I think it's because we've been impacted by progressive education more than Europeans have. And progressive education is anti-facts, reality, it's knowledge, it's much more about socialization socialization and emotions and cultivating emotions. Don't confuse people with too much facts and too much knowledge. And Europe never bought into that, not to the extent America did. It was an American philosopher who came up with it, James Dewey, and we bought it and we have it and the rest of the world doesn't. And that's why mathematics education, science education is so bad in the US relative to the rest of the world. All right. Thanks, Yaron, as always, for advancing objectives and Ayn Rand's ideas. Your courses have made a huge impact on me. Thank you, Emmanuel. Really appreciate that. All right. I'll keep the other 4 Super Chat questions for next time. They're all the lower dollar amounts. And what day is it today? Thursday. Okay. So have a great weekend. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. I will see you on Saturday and Sunday, probably. I'm not sure exactly what times. Depends on what's going on the weekend. But definitely be here Saturday and Sunday. We'll do one of the positive shows on the next virtue. I have to decide if to do honesty or productiveness next. I might do honesty next. I've got more to say about honesty. But we'll do honesty and productiveness in the next couple of virtues ones. We'll definitely do one on the election. How can I not do one when Tuesday is going to be on Tuesday? So we'll do one on the depressing news about the election. I also want to do one on Sam Harris interviews Sandel. And there's a number of videos of good stuff, bad stuff that I want to comment on. So we'll do some of that. And then Wednesday will be my post-election analysis. That'll be deep. Right? Hopefully on Wednesday, we'll know who won. That is I care less about who wins than I want to know who won, because I think the worst thing for the country is no clear winner. This goes to the courts and they're arguing and fighting and Trump refuses to leave. And that is the worst outcome possible. So I hope we have a clear winner on, if not on Tuesday night, then sometime on Wednesday. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. See you on the weekend. Bye.